Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Leadership Alliance's Virtual Professional Development Series workshop. Today, we will be talking about applying to graduate school. My name is Dr. Gina Astorini, and I am the Associate Director for the Leadership Alliance, and I will be moderating this workshop. This workshop was created by leaders and administrators from the Leadership Alliance Consortium that is made up of minority-serving institutions, historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic-serving, Native American-serving, and predominantly white Research One institutions, with the purpose of delivering information on graduate school preparation, the application process, and the components necessary for a competitive graduate school application submission. The Leadership Alliance notes the Supreme Court of the United States decision on affirmative action and encourages all of our students to review their home institution's response by way of a message from their president's office. Most presidents have issued a public statement, and we would encourage students to pursue the institutions who have demonstrated a commitment to supporting diverse students. The Leadership Alliance stands in solidarity with President Christine Paxson's statement from Brown University on affirmative action issued on June 30th, 2023. Next slide, please. At this time, I'd like to welcome our panelists who will be joining us on this workshop. We have Dr. Oludurotimi Adetunji from Brown University, Associate Dean for Undergraduate Research and Inclusive Science and Adjunct Assistant Professor of Physics. We have Dr. Lisa Brown from Morgan State University, Director of the Office of Undergraduate Research and Associate Professor in the Department of Biology, and Dr. Naoko Tanese from New York University, Professor in the Department of Microbiology and Associate Dean for Biomedical Sciences. Thank you, panelists, for joining us. So during this workshop, this is an overview of what you will hear, and all part of the graduate school process, that self-assessment, that self-inventory, determining what is the right fit for you, and then reviewing of programs at various schools, looking at admission requirements, faculty research at those schools, programs, and then the application itself. What are the components? It looks slightly different from what the undergraduate application process looked like. And then the statement of purpose. We will touch upon the statement of purpose in a general way because next week, the entire virtual workshop series is devoted to the statement of purpose. So at this time, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Dr. Oludurotimi Adetunji.
All right, thank you, Dr. Astorini. So I'll be talking in this slide about determining the best practice, best program self-assessment. So in order for you to go to graduate school, it's important for you to always do this self-assessment. And there are a couple of points that I will be sharing. So the first thing is that you should definitely ask yourself, why do you want to go to graduate school? Are you interested in exploring some area of research, inquiry that has been of interest to you that you will continue to explore even further? So write down your interest. Are you interested in the interdisciplinary research area or more research to solve big global problems? You should also begin to think about what are your academic and professional goals. So there are people that want to obviously follow a research career path. It could be in academia, that they want to do this, or some people want to be, they want to teach at a higher education institution. So what is that professional path that you like to take? Is your goal to work in industry? Do you want to become an entrepreneur, for example? That might be one reason why you want to explore why you go to graduate school or even to professional school. Then there are areas of that you might also want to consider public sector as a way for you to give back. Do you want to, in the future, run for office and you want to have certain skill sets to be able to do that? So ask yourself all of this question. In addition to that, you should think about, are you adequately prepared right now to apply to graduate school? Based on your self-assessment, you should be able to have that self-judgment. If you need help with certain additional skills, or you need help with more research skill, you might explore post-bac as a possible option after graduating. Or if you need more experience in conducting research, that might also be an opportunity for you to seek a research master. So it's important to do all of this self-assessment before you even apply. The other thing is that you might ask yourself questions about, for the field in which I'm really interested in, do I really need a PhD for this field? There are certain fields where terminal degrees are just having a master. So you have to ask yourself this question. If your goal is to go work for an industry where some industry, you just like in computer science, for example, you might just need a master's to be able to rise in the company. So you should ask yourself all of this question. Then finally, you should ask yourself, is it better for me to just follow the master track rather than go into the PhD track? I think once you have this holistic self-assessment, then you can begin the process of deciding if it's the right time for you to apply and what schools you should apply into. I will pass it on to my colleague.
Hi. Let me go through some of the things we'd like you to consider when applying to graduate school. So first, school or program reputation. Now, if you have some idea of what areas of research you want to pursue in graduate school, then you're likely to choose institutions, graduate programs that have good reputation or a large number of faculty conducting research in your areas of interest. Now, how do you find out what those schools are? Well, I suggest asking your research advisor, or if you're doing summer research and you've become interested in that particular area of research, you should definitely talk to your program sponsor or faculty advisor, and just ask for a list of institutions or even just list of names of investigators. Then you can look them up to see what institutions they're affiliated with, and you can read something about their research on the school's website. I would also ask students who've recently applied to graduate schools, or upperclassmen, or anyone in your network who've gone through the process, and get some ideas on how to go about finding institution programs to apply to. Now, so if you have sort of general interest, but not necessarily specific areas that you want to study, that's okay. So you have broad research interests. And so there are umbrella programs. These are programs that are that offer multiple tracks of training. And so you just apply to the program, but you don't necessarily have to choose a particular area, particular focus. And they offer opportunities to explore, within the umbrella program, and choose investigators that may or may not be in the area that you had thought about. But sometimes you find out that this area is very attractive to you. So it's good to apply to umbrella programs that offer you that flexibility, and make sure that there is that flexibility when you apply to umbrella programs. But if you're more or less, if you really know what you want to do, like you want to do neuroscience, then you want to focus on institutions, programs that have very strong track record of training in neuroscience. The location is quite important because you'll be spending 5-6 years, perhaps longer, during your PhD. And so you want to think hard about where do you see yourself thriving, in what part of the country. Especially important for many students is whether the location of the school is close to your home or the support community that you feel you need to rely on throughout the training. I mean, it's a huge concern, and I know a number of students have chosen the location based on that, the support that they want, because it's going to be a long journey, and it's good to be able to have close friends and family nearby. Now it's tempted to apply to lots of schools now that, well, it's still a lot of, like our institution has been doing virtual interviews since the pandemic. So it doesn't take time to travel, and, it's less burdensome to interview. So it's, like I said, it's tempting to apply to lots of schools, but I think you want to make an effort to sort of narrow down, whether or not, you think you can live in that city or the place that you're considering applying. The stipends, most PhD programs offer a stipend for your living expenses, and some schools offer a fixed stipend that you get for the entire year, entire calendar year. Now, other schools may offer stipends that maybe for 9 months, and maybe during the summer, there are additional opportunities to earn some income. And some schools' stipends are dependent on teaching activities. And so you want to find out what the mechanism is that the program of interest provides in terms of in terms of stipend levels. And the levels vary quite a bit from school to school, certainly across the country, because the cost of living is very different. But you want to keep in mind that you need to pay for your rent and other living expenses. So I encourage you to inquire with the institutional leadership or certainly students who are in the program and ask whether they can live on their stipend. And usually students will give you their honest answer and experience. Now, fellowship opportunities are clearly available. I mean, you get most schools will guarantee stipend, but you also want to apply for fellowships. And depending on the institution, you get rewarded for receiving a fellowship. And typically students apply for individual fellowship applications that's offered by the NIH for U.S. citizens and permanent residents. And this is a good exercise, and success rate varies, but it's good to be able to go through that experience of writing a proposal, convincing proposal that will undergo reviews, and you get feedback, and you gain that experience, and it could be very valuable, beyond graduate school. When you're in a new position, in any position, you need to write a proposal and be able to pitch your idea for funding. Now, program requirements, again, something that's important to consider. Pay attention to the amount of coursework that the school or institution requires. Lab rotations, most PhD programs will ask students to do about three lab rotations during the first year before you choose a thesis advisor. And then there's the qualifying exam. And most PhD programs require that students take the qualifying exam at the end of first year or year two. And then finally, once you start your dissertation research, want to make sure that there's an oversight by the institution so that you're not like lost on your own to try to figure out the next steps. But programs require that students have committee meetings with your dissertation advisor and thesis committee members, so that faculty are keeping track of where you're at during graduate school. Because otherwise, it's like I say, it's a long haul, and you want to make sure that you're hitting milestones, and want to make sure that that's all documented by the committee. Networking, socialization opportunities, again, very important for your well-being, and want to hear from students what their experiences are at that particular institution, whether there are groups and activities and events that students can easily participate, and something that is any sort of special interest that you have, whether there are other like-minded students who would welcome you to that community. So you want to feel welcome, or you want to feel like this is a place that you think you belong. And finally, school resources. There are many resources that you want to make sure they are in place at the institution you're applying to. For example, career development office, or some sort of career development activities, workshops, because that's critical to deciding the next steps after your training. You want to make sure there's good physical and mental wellness office. You want to make sure there's health insurance, and then there are professionals who can respond in terms of maintaining your mental well-being. And also you want to make sure there's policy that advocates for students' rights, including Title IX. And then things like housing, like financial needs, these are all the sort of important things in your life that you need to be prepared for. I know it's a lot, but it's just something that should be part of a consideration when applying to graduate school, to find out as much information as we can from the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tanese. It was so comprehensive. Dr. Brown.
Yes. Thank you. So all of the components that were just mentioned are super important. And you can see that there's a lot to consider when thinking about graduate school, really drilling down on what your research interests are, and also doing your homework about the institutions that you think that you're interested in as well. Once you've determined that, then it's time to consider the application. And one of the things that students do not realize is that preparing the application itself also takes some time. So you should really start this process early. To do a good job, you need to start early and give yourself enough time to do it successfully. So first, read the application thoroughly before attempting to complete it. If you're unsure about any parts of the application, most schools provide a contact information so that you can call them or contact them to get some clarity for the application itself. You don't want to complete an application incorrectly or do something on the application that you misunderstood. Okay? Application fees. Most applications require a fee, and that's for processing the application itself. So you can imagine that an institution may get hundreds of applications, and someone has to go through the application, divert them to the correct committees that are going to review it. So application waivers typically cost, I think, between $50 to $170, depending on the program and the schools that you're interested in applying to. You may be able to get waivers for these fees. If you attend undergraduate research conferences like ABR-CMS or SACNAS, many times those institutions are there recruiting, and you can go to their table and ask if they offer fee waivers. You can also contact the admissions office directly and ask if they have waivers as well. And many times they do. So don't be afraid to communicate with the institution that you're interested in. Test scores. Right now, most institutions do not require GRE scores. However, there are a few that still do. So GREs, graduate record exams, are just one aspect that's looked at. They give an indication of skills or gaps when it comes to quantitative or verbal skills. If your scores are very low, if you take them and you're very low, it may impact your admission. Mid-range scores lead the reviewer to consider the applicant in a more holistic approach. So they'll take into consideration your research experience, what type of advanced courses you may have completed already, and how well you did in those courses. You should take the subject test if you are unsure about other areas on your application. So for example, if you did not do as well in a course that you thought you should do well in, and you take the subject test and do well in that subject, then that is looked upon favorably. It could give you an edge. So my advice is to take the practice test first and see how you do. Okay. So transcripts. Your application will require that you submit official undergraduate transcripts from your current institution. Please be aware of what the process is for requesting your transcripts from your institution and how long it may take for those transcripts to be sent. In most cases, the transcripts will be sent directly to the institution that you're applying for. So be sure that you have your list of institutions that you're applying to first, and also have the information regarding where to send your transcripts, whether that be via email or by US mail. Letters of recommendation. Just like the application process takes some time to do, it also takes time to write a good letter of recommendation. And that's something that I do a lot. So I can say in one semester, I may get 10 to 12 students asking for letters of recommendation. And not only is it 10 to 12 students, each of those students may have 3 or 4 letters that they're requiring for different schools. So you can see that that's a lot of letters that one recommender may have to do. So if that's the case, you have to keep in mind that recommenders have busy schedules, and they would greatly benefit from ample time to write and submit your letter. Oftentimes, the institution has very specific questions that they ask the recommender to address. And so your recommender is going to need time to tailor their letters to answer those questions. Again, as someone who does a lot of letters of recommendations, I would suggest giving your recommender at least 1 month to prepare and submit your letter. And along the way, you can give gentle reminders to your recommender by email. Gentle reminder, deadline is coming up soon. Hopefully you'll still be able to send the letter of recommendation. And that will, again, keep in mind, in the back of their mind, that they still have these letters on their plate to do. I also tell my students to submit to the recommenders a spreadsheet with all of the institutions that they plan to apply to, institutions and the program that they're applying to, the due date for the letters of recommendation, and include, if you can, the website for the program. It's always nice for the recommender to refer back to the website in the program to see exactly what you're interested in and which of the professors that you're interested in working with as well. That can provide some more information for them when they're writing your letters. Requesting your letters. When requesting your letter, your email or direct conversation should begin with telling the requester why you're interested in pursuing an advanced degree and your career goals. Then you can follow that with your request. If you expect them to write more than 1 letter, state that up front. There's nothing more annoying than a student saying, I'd like a letter of recommendation, and then 2 weeks or 1 week later asking for 3 more. They may request more information. They may say yes, they may say no. So be prepared to have, a number of mentors that can write you letters of recommendation, because they do have the right to say no. If they say yes, you should provide the spreadsheet mentioned, your CV or resume, and your personal statement. The personal statement and the CV help the recommender to gain additional information about you, and that will help to create a very intimate letter that reflects their relationship with you. Okay, the statement of purpose or personal statement. A few things that reviewers are looking for, and we're not going to go into a whole lot of detail because, as Dr. Astorini mentioned, you'll get a lot more instruction on this later. But the few things that the reviewers are looking for: did the applicant read the instructions? It's super important that you read the instructions for that particular institution as to what they want in their letter. Although you'll begin writing a general personal statement, you're going to have to tailor each of your personal statements to each of your institutions that you're applying to. Oftentimes in the instructions, there are certain things that an institution will ask you to include, such as your interest in working with a certain faculty and or interest in a particular concentration within the program, and your statement should reflect all of that information, okay? Statements should also reflect your personality and your passion and enthusiasm. Remember, these reviewers may be reading hundreds of personal statements. So how are they going to remember you? What in the personal statement are you going to write where they can say, oh yeah, I remember that particular person based on what they wrote in their personal statement? You're going to focus a lot on your research experience that you had by giving solid examples, discussing your projects you may have worked on, not so much on the techniques that you learned, but more on the goals of the project, the results, and the implications of the work that you've done. So as mentioned, the statement must be tailored to a specific program, include why you're interested in the specific program, and maybe one or two faculty that you're interested in. And most importantly, please proofread your personal statement. Make sure that you do not get your tailored personal statements mixed up. So if you have a personal statement mentioning a professor from Brown University and their research, please do not send that personal statement to New York University. Please proofread your personal statements and make sure that you're including the correct one in your application. There are other requirements, particular to specific programs. They may require you to write some other essays. So it's super important to review the application first before starting the process. Curriculum vitae. So curriculum vitae, also referred to as CVs, are often the norm. They're the norm in the scientific research environment. They provide full professional and educational history. There's no limit to the number of pages. You really do not have to modify a CV to fit a specific applications. Resumes normally only have space for a few key sections. A CV will allow you to include a wide range of professional accomplishments and activities in sections like awards and grants, conferences attended, conferences that you participated in, poster presentations, and publications. So it's super important to know the difference between a CV and a resume. A CV is much more appropriate for the application process, as most reviewers will know that you haven't really had access or time to a number of different employment opportunities at this point in your life. So a CV gives you the opportunity to highlight your accomplishments as an undergraduate student. And I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Wow, that was fantastic. Thank you. We do want to address the artificial intelligence assisted writing tools. We know that students lately have been having questions about this. And Dr. Tanese, what is your feeling about using artificial intelligence assisted writing tools with regard to the statement of purpose?
Well, I want to bring it up because I think, some students, well, everybody is using it to some extent, and it is here to stay. So the question is, what do schools have policies? And there are some loose guidelines, but I don't think an institution will say you cannot use AI-assisted tools for your application. I mean, I don't think it will be so clear about that. But it's it can be a good place to start. It's just that for statement of purpose, and we'll talk a lot about this next week. But you really have to convey your authentic self. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Like it has to be you that's represented in the statement. And I think what happens with AI-assisted writing is that it tends to generate text that is very generic, very broad. Maybe sound good, grammatically correct, but it's just not going to sound like you. And so you can experiment and see what AI will write about you. But I think you have to be very cautious about how much you take advantage of these tools. I mean, they are powerful, but I just don't think you want to portray yourself as who you're not, because that's what I think AI assisted tools will give you. So you can use it as a template starting point, but make sure that you write something that truly reflects who you are. And that message has to come across when reviewers read the statement, because if it's very generic, then it will not impress the reviewer, and it will disappoint the reviewer, and it's not going to leave any sort of lasting impression, as Dr. Brown just mentioned. Like you want to be able to get the reviewer's attention when they read your statement.
Thank you. I also want to mention that those viewers out in our audience who are members of the Leadership Alliance Summer Research Early Identification Program, if you apply to graduate school and the school that you apply to is part of the Leadership Alliance Consortium, your application fee is waived to that school for your graduate application. So I also wanted to throw that out there as far as waivers go. Anything more on the artificial intelligence tools from our panelists? It was really a wonderful overview and recommendation. Thank you so much.
I can chip in.
Sure.
I completely agree with what Dr. Tanese was saying, but you can also use the tool as the editing to edit what you've written yourself. Your authentic, once you have your authentic statement written, you can just use it to proofread rather than using it to create the essay for you itself. So use it as an editing tool rather than the tool for creation of the essay.
Yeah.
I want to ask Dr. Brown, what do you recommend to your students if they ask this question?
Ask the question about AI assisted tools.
Just like students ask, can I use AI to start my statement of purpose?
I would suggest not using it initially. Again, as you also mentioned, the being able to present you as a unique individual, it really needs to be expressed in that personal statement, right? So if you're using an AI tool, of course, it's going, to not be as unique, because someone else may be using the same tool and getting some of the same information. So I suggest not using it at all. And quite frankly, I can tell when they have used it. The writing is different. If you know the person, for me, I can tell when it's been doctored a little bit. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to go to the next slide. So graduate statements, the statement of purpose, and what might institutions be looking for. So what we generally say to students is that every application, every institution, and even at one institution in a department that has different programs, are likely going to ask for different essays. And they may even call these essays by different names. They may call a personal statement the actual statement of purpose. But let me explain to you how we have broken down the whole statement of purpose as far as the graduate essays go. So we advise students to prepare 4 essays. Okay, and I want all of you to take note of this, because next week, when we are going to go through the statement of purpose very specifically and break it down, I want all of you to have already had an idea of what we're talking about when we talk about this statement of purpose, and it's a process. And what would be a really good idea for all of you is to maybe outline for yourself for next week what you would write down for each of these essays. So we're going to talk about the personal statement, the who you are. And we're going to talk about a lot in the next slide. And we want to talk about the research statement. That's your second essay. And in that research statement, you should talk about how the research that you have been involved in, how that has informed your ideas for your next research project or what you would like to study. And you should be able to connect your research experiences with your ideas, with some tangible way to connect what you've studied, what you've done in a research lab, and what you would like to do in graduate school. The diversity statement. So currently, the diversity statement is required as part of most graduate school application essays. Again, in light of affirmative action, we are not sure if, what this will look like in the future. That's what I have to say. There's uncertainty, but I will tell you to prepare your diversity statement. And what I mean by that is your identity, who you are, and how that identity has prepared you for your next steps in your academic pathway, okay? How have you addressed the diversity that you have experienced, your unique you, and ways that you have informed others about the need for acknowledgement of diversity, equity, inclusiveness, access, all of those things. And then finally, the fourth statement, we're going to call that the statement of purpose. And that encompasses the other three statements, the personal statement, the research statement, and the diversity statement. Now, it's why I say it's important to have all four written is because each program, as I've mentioned, may ask you for one or two, but all programs want all of these essays included, even if it's within one essay. They may say a statement of purpose and your research statement. So you want to be sure that you know what goes in, what these institutions, what these programs are looking for because it can get confusing. And that's why we say, prepare all four, be ready to address all of these things in either one big statement where you've pulled pieces from each of the other three essays, the personal, research, and diversity, or it's one, it's four different essays. So often, and I think even now more so than ever, sometimes writing samples are requested. And going back to that artificial intelligence assisted tool, perhaps institutions may start to ask for samples of your writing just to compare what you actually write like and to determine if, to what degree you may have used artificial intelligence. So again, being very careful about that artificial intelligence writing tool and how you use it becomes very important. Next slide, please. So with the personal statement, so the WHO, the WHO, you want to welcome, you want to describe, you want to pull that person into who you are and describing your unique and specific details that will give the committee an insight as to who you are, the way you perceive the world, the way that your life and your experiences and all of those things define you and define your goals. And you also want to describe your history. You want to talk about, how you've learned what you have learned and how you have become interested in this field. And you also want to talk about your accomplishments. You want to talk about the things that you have achieved as an undergraduate. And the outline, you want to describe for a committee what you have, how you have taken your experiences and how you have leveraged them into your goals and your interest in graduate school. So again, these three things within the personal statement. So remember the who, you want to welcome, invite them in. the history of what you've learned, how you've learned, and then the outline of how you've reached this point and how you've developed your goals and interest in graduate school. And in particular, the particular graduate program that you're applying to. So we will really dig into this next week, but it will be great for you to have an outline of each of these essays for yourself for next week. So the final slide, which was, don't forget to tune in next week for the statement of purpose. Same time, 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into our questions and answers, and we can remove the PowerPoint from, yep. And the first question I'm going to ask is from a person who's watching the workshop live. And this person asks, do you have any advice on the number of programs that they should apply to? General panelist question. I know that Dr. Brown really went into this, but I guess, is there a standard norm?
I don't know if there's a standard number. Again, don't forget that these schools have application fees. So that has to be taken into consideration when constructing your list. And I'd also say that your list should not contain all top tier schools like Yale, Brown, Hopkins. You should have some middle tiered schools and maybe even some lower tiered schools as well. I think that the acceptance rate average is about 15% of the applications might be accepted into graduate programs.
Wow.
So it's quite selective. So 5, 6 might be a good number, more if you can, with a range, top tier to mediocre to a little bit lower on the scale.
That's good advice.
Right, I mean, I think the other consideration is Dr. Astorini just went over, like each application, so you have to prepare for that program or that institution, and so that's a fair amount of writing you have to do to tailor your application, and so you want to apply to schools that you really are interested in getting into, because otherwise you have to invest that time to get to know the program and read faculty research, and it's a lot of investment of time. So you can't really apply to a ton of schools without not spending appropriate amount of time, because if you don't do that, then you're not going to accomplish what you aim to accomplish. You're not going to grab their interest if you write a pretty generic statement. So I think that's another part to consider, is like how much time do you want to allot to preparing these applications, or how many schools?
Right. Dr. Oludurotimi?
Yeah. So for me, as a general rule, I've always told my student minimum of 5, maximum of 10, but nothing more than that. Like, because otherwise just get too much, right? Yeah. Because just think about it, when you're applying, you have to write unique letters for each of those institutions, right? The people writing your letter of recommendation also have to tailor their letters for each of those institutions. So it's a lot of time commitment. So I would say minimum 5, not more than 10.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Oludurotimi, this question is for you. I have heard that taking a gap year between undergrad and applying to grad school is a good decision. However, I am worried that applying in a place outside of my undergraduate institution may make it more difficult, as I may not have direct or in-person access to my professors and mentors. Do you have any recommendations for how to prepare the year before our gap year in terms of the application process?
Sure. So, I mean, first of all, as part of the strategy of why you should ask yourself, why do you need a gap year? Some people need gap year for mental health reasons, for all kinds of other reasons. So if you decide that you need a gap year, then you should ask yourself, what are you going to do during that gap year that will actually help that will make your application even more solid. So think about activities that will do that. You could take a gap year to continue research in an area, or you could take a gap year to learn a particular topic more in depth. So that's the first thing. The other thing is that you have to also think about keeping the connection with your mentors. Even though you might not be in person, I mean, we all learned through the COVID years that we can just collaborate virtually. So do not lose that sense of collaboration with your mentor. Keep in touch with them. Keep them informed about what your plans are. And I'm sure by them being involved and being informed, and they will also be able to guide you as you are planning to take a gap year, then you will ultimately have all the resources that you need when you do apply. Now, when you take a gap year though, usually I encourage students to know, don't take too long. Don't say, okay, I'll take a gap year for 1 year, then you take like 6-7 years gap year. Then, sometimes if you do that, because a lot of time, once people start working, they might not be interested in going to grad school anymore. So you have to sort of balance that as well in your decision making. But ultimately, keep in touch with your mentors, let them know what you're up to. And even if it's not in person, you could still have this relationship, which is important because you absolutely need people to write a very strong letter of recommendation, because letter of recommendation can make the difference between you getting in and not getting into a graduate program.
Thank you. Dr. Brown, this question is for you.
Can I comment on the last
Oh,
one?
please do. Sure.
Yes, because this is kind of perfect for me because I did take a gap year. After undergrad, I worked 2 years as a research technician at Yale University. I'm from Connecticut, and that was right down the street basically from me. And it was the best thing that could have happened to me. I worked there as a technician, and I took some courses at a local college, graduate level courses, to show that I could do graduate level work, and did very well in that. And my letters of recommendation were stellar from the people that I worked with as a research technician. And they were also very good mentors towards pushing me towards graduate school and preparing me for the graduate school process. So I'm very much in favor of a gap year if it is used properly to prepare yourself for graduate school. So just thought I'd throw that in.
Thank you for sharing your experience. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I'd also want to point out that there are post-bac programs, especially NIH has a big one. And the Leadership Alliance has the resource web page where there's information about post-bac programs that students can apply to. And so I would take advantage of those programs if you don't have immediate connection to an institution where you get paid to work as a technician or research assistant. Sometimes like that's hard to come by. So applying to post-bac programs is another way to strengthen your application.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. So the Leadership Alliance resource page actually has a link to the map of the United States, and you can hover over each of the little nodules of where there is it's called the PrEP, the program for research experience preparation. And it'll also give you the contact information at those institutions. So thank you. Okay, Dr. Brown, this next question is for you. What is the best time to start preparing for graduate school as a STEM major? How long does the preparation and application process take for graduate school for STEM students?
So really, I would like to say that beginning the process should start really in the sophomore year, junior year, where you're thinking about why you want to go to grad school, where you want to go to grad school, what do you want to go to grad school for? Okay, so that's super important, as it was already mentioned. And then in the junior year, starting to take the GRE exams if needed, looking at the application process itself, again, looking at what are the different parts of the application, preparing all of those statements as you mentioned just in the last slide. So again, I'd say sophomore into sophomore year, just beginning the process of thinking about it and then implementing in the junior year.
Wonderful, thank you. Dr. Tanese, this question is for you. Is there any disadvantage or advantage in grad school applications for those who decide to go into industry a few years after graduating?
In my experience, and I've seen lots and lots of applications, we do have a fair number of applicants who've spent a couple of years in industry. And I think they're, if they're, to be a full-time job, so they would gain considerable amount of experience. So that's, I think that's good. It's, it's not that different from working as a technician or being doing a postbac. I mean, you do get, you have more opportunities for the period you're hired by the industry. There are some differences in terms of the type of work that you end up doing in the industry. So it all depends on your employer. I mean, some may be like startups that you actually be you can be fully engaged in planning project, designing experiments, and work with other people and you get some mentoring, and so that gives you a lot of good experience, just like working for a PI. In other cases, the work may be more sort of routine or part of the if it's like a pharmaceutical company, or they may not necessarily have you don't necessarily have the ownership of the project, and you may be part of the team, and so that gives you a little bit of, I guess, a disadvantage, because grad schools tend to look for candidates who've really have had experience to drive your own project, or at least be highly engaged. So it's not that that's a deal breaker, but I think you want to explain why you chose to work in the industry, and what you're thinking about, what you've gained, what you've learned from the experience. And so I don't think it's necessarily a disadvantage, but like I said, we've had a number of students who've had that experience. One other thing that I'll bring up is when we select to interview students who work in the industry, unfortunately, they say, well, I can't really go into details of my project because they're like proprietary content. Right. And so that makes it a little bit hard. So you have to be creative in, what you can convey, and maybe, you can focus on some other aspects that's not directly involved in, what you do, but that's a slight disadvantage if I were to comment on applicants coming from the industry.
Thank you. Here's a general question for anybody on the panel. Are there specific types of activities or experiences that admission committees particularly value?
I mean, is this talking more about non-research activities? Is there a way for them to clarify? Because obviously engaging in research, being able to show that you are actually interested in doing research, it's always good on your application. But if they are talking about non-research activities, I think anything that has to do with leadership qualities, have you collaborated with other people before on projects? Are you a good team player? Those kind of qualities are also really important.
I have heard from students who ask questions like, is it better to do one continuous research project? Like I did summer research this summer and I returned to do research again with the same mentor, same lab, same area of research, or is it better to have different research experiences? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think there's any sort of clear-cut answer. And if it makes sense to return to the same lab because you had a really good experience and worked on an exciting project, and you can pick up. It's not easy to do, but pick up where you left off, or work on a related project. I mean, that builds longer relationship, stronger relationship with your mentor, and that gives mentor a better sense of your potential as a graduate school applicant, right? So I think that's fine. I mean, I think that's great experience, but if you're a summer experience, again, not everybody has this opportunity, right? You can't necessarily go back to the same lab for financial reasons and whatnot. And if your first experience was not quite in the area that you want to continue, and then I would pick another lab, another area that you want to pursue, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to sort of try to go back if you're not that excited about research. I mean, I think the key is to be engaged in research that excites you, because that's what you want to convey when you're applying to graduate school, and certainly during the interview, like why you did that research, because there was an appeal to be part of that project.
Yeah, I would think that also for a reviewer that's looking at a student that may have had 2 or 3 different research experiences, what they learned from those experiences is super important too. Did you learn any skills? Did you add to your critical thinking skills? Did you learn more about the scientific process, scientific theory? Those things, if they're expressed well in the personal statement, I think having 2 or 3 different research experiences really won't matter that much.
Thank you. And one final question. Is there anything that, if you knew then what you know now, is there anything that you might have done differently with your career or your academic pathway?
Well, I won't say anything that I would do differently, but I would just like let the student know that I started doing undergraduate research in my very first semester in college. And that was the gateway that opened my eyes to graduate school. So that I feel like getting involved early, it's important for potential future career.
I'd have to agree. I didn't get involved in undergraduate research until probably my senior year. And it was that mentor who said that I should consider graduate school at that time, but it was too late. I was already a senior, so it was too late to really consider seriously applying to graduate schools at that point, which was the reason why I decided to take a job. I did not really want to go to graduate school right after undergrad. That was not on my list of things to do. I didn't discover that until I started working in a research lab, that was my passion.
Well, that's great.
I mean, I'm too old to recall my undergraduate and graduate school application process, but I would say I always wanted to research, and I just kept going. I mean, it's I just that's what I want to do, and so I know there a lot of students are concerned about how to do this all correctly, and what's the protocol, and you sort of want as much information as possible, but don't let that paralyze you, because if you want to do research, you want to get into graduate school, if you want to do science, there will be a way to do that. And so I try not to overthink about what's the right thing to do. Be yourself, and just convey that you're super excited about becoming a scientist, and you want your PhD, and I hope the doors will open for you with your energy and enthusiasm.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Tanese and Dr. Brown, Dr. Adetunji, for your pearls of wisdom, your best advice practices for our students. I hope that all of you found this information helpful and that you feel a little bit more prepared for your next steps. But again, next week, join us for the Statement of Purpose workshop. You definitely don't want to miss it. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Thank you and good luck.